it's Coach Fro from RocioFlores.com, and today I want to do a 2020 review / 2021 resolution-ish. So every year before this, or at least for the last 2 years, I've been doing these kind of videos where I do like a review of the year, kind of like what I learned, how the year went, that kind of stuff. And then I do a resolution video. And to be clear, when I say resolution, I don't mean like, I don't do a resolution video, or I don't set resolutions that are kind of like the typical resolutions. More than anything, it's more like talking about what I want for the year, what kind of like intention I want to set for the year, versus like setting like a very clear, like, as of today, I'm not doing so and so. And so I wanted to do this again this year. Of course, this year's a little bit, I don't know, it feels a little bit different, a little weird, just because I feel like the vibe for the whole year is just different. So I have notes. Look how cute my little avocados are. And I guess I want to structure this video in a way where I can kind of talk about sort of like this past year versus what I'm from this past year, kind of what I want for this year, and go over it different areas, because I think this year I really felt like everything kind of like compounded on each other and everything was so connected to each other. So it wasn't like this one thing happened or this one lesson was learned. This year was weird. I think that, I think we all feel that. Obviously, there's just a lot going on this year. And I think we're all kind of feeling that same feeling of like, okay, we're going into the new year, but like, we have no control over anything. Like, we don't know what's going to happen this year. We don't know if this year's going to be worse, if there's going to be things that are better, if there's going to be things that are individually in each person's lives. Like, it really doesn't matter how bad this last year was if it didn't affect you, but this year it does, right? So if anything, 2020 is like a mood, while 2021, hopefully we can choose a slightly better mood for it. So yeah. So I guess the way I want to sort of talk about the video, I guess I'm going to create like a little structure here where I juxtapose 2020, but also kind of like 2015 all the way to 2020 for me, versus what I'm hoping will be, the next few years of my life, the next, or just things that I want as part of my life. Like, every year coming is like part of your life, right? It's not like suddenly one year gets to be different than every other year, unless you're doing something that's incredibly different, and will be marked incredibly different. But yes, 2020 itself was kind of marked incredibly different from other years. To me, it kind of felt like, at least this is how I'm kind of structuring it in my head to kind of help me make sense of it, is, 2015-ish to like 2019 was a years of learning, was a lot of learning, a lot of like, I'm going to learn this so I can do this. And then 2020 was like, okay, well, did you learn it? Because now you're going to need it. And so it definitely felt like I was, tested. I think a lot of us felt that, whether you see like the word, whether you like the word tested, or like that you had to like, I don't know what's a better way of describing that, but like whether it was that way for you or not, I think we all kind of went through a lot, regardless of what specifics were. Everybody, I think we all had kind of like a big collective, oh my God, what is happening kind of feeling. And on top of that, I know for a fact that many people had like, oh, so we're like going through a pandemic and all these crazy things in my life. And so I felt that. I know a lot of people around me felt that. And I felt the weight of knowing that everybody else was nobody was just going through the basics. Like, nobody was just at a baseline, oh, the only thing that's going on in my life is that I can't go outside. And I think that's the case for a lot of people. And so even if that was the minimum, that was the only difficult part, I think that was still a big lesson, a big test for a lot of people of how the world basically changed suddenly, and we all had to learn how to navigate it. And then obviously for people who had it way worse, like, and not to put like a qualification on pain, but there were people who, they saw the effects very deeply of what was happening this year personally in their life, and a lot of other things as well. And so I think we can all agree that 2020 was a year to be tested, to see, you know, we all got that feeling of like, you know, can we stop the test now? Like, we're good. We learned our lesson. Like, can we be done? So the way I want to start, I guess, the way I usually talk or begin these videos is by setting like a word that I want to focus on the year. So kind of like an intention for the year. I know a lot of people do this in a lot of different circles. And I noticed that that's kind of cool. Like, that's when my worlds kind of collide, because I see like people in like the self-help world, people in the health world, people in the business world, you know, people in various areas, all kind of have that same. You either have people who are like, we're going to set these very specific, like, no more of this on this year, and people who are like, let's just kind of grab a vibe for the year. So I want to kind of juxtapose last year's to this year's, and then I'm going to break it down in, I'm going to talk about my health, relationships, myself, and then kind of the world around me, and then my work. So I guess I'll just get started. So last year, the word that I chose, and again, what I'm really trying to get at the point that, like, every year before last year, I really felt like I put in a lot of effort towards like learning and growing and doing stuff, and like I felt very confident. Like, every year I felt like, okay, I did this and I did that, and there was like a lot of productivity and a lot of like just like, I'm gonna learn this and then I'm gonna do this. And then 2018 kind of sucked. There was a lot of like things that were completely out of our control. 2019 kind of sucked. There were things that got in the way, and so I started the year 2020 very much like cautious. Like, I was like, my word, what I'm gonna focus on this year is to continue. Like, that's what I had set my intention for. Like, I don't know what this year will bring. I don't know what I can handle. I don't know how I'm gonna feel. I don't know what I guess I was feeling. I'm gonna say cautious. That's the feeling I had in the beginning of the year. Just, I remember writing like my little vision board, kind of what I wanted throughout the year, and everything was just keep doing the things that you're already doing. Like, keep doing these small little things that you've been working on for the last few years that you learned. Keep applying them. Keep focusing on that. And little did I know that of all the years to need to do that or to have that kind of focus, I think 2020 was the year to do that. So the previous years before 2020, I really did feel like I was like, well, because I was learning a lot and putting things to action, if a lot of things fell short on my end. The way I felt like, okay, so I know I can set a very specific goal to lose weight and I will do it, but then just because you do a thing doesn't mean that you get the result you wanted. So you can like get your perfect body and still feel like crap about yourself. You can read every book you wanted and still feel like, well, now what do I do about that, right? Or you can like create all these relationships. Now, how do I maintain them? Like, it was every year before this, I kind of felt like it was a matter of like willpower versus real change. And a lot of the pressure on me to like, I felt like a lot of pressure to do those things, to get things done, to have like very concrete results of like, see, I know this stuff, I can do this stuff, right? But this last year, I think in 2020, what I really recognized is that no matter how much I was learning, no matter how much I felt like I was doing internally, I had all this like self-doubt, all this like, I'm going to say like self-contempt, like, you know, okay, well, I can do this, but nobody can see this, so it must not mean anything. Nobody cares about this, so it doesn't matter. Or just a lot of like self-hate, a lot of like really negative, you know, negativity. Like, I talk about it, I share about those kind of things often. But I guess what I kind of realized this year, I guess, sorry, it's really hard to kind of like come up with like how to explain things and put them into words that make sense to others. But I get really nervous on videos. I think what I noticed this year, and this was a positive part of 2020, was that while I have these self-doubt thoughts, at the end of the day, I know the thing. While I may not be sure who cares or how it works, or like I may have all these thoughts like people don't care, people don't like you, people don't think this, people think that, blah, blah, blah. I can still do the thing that I need to do. I still know myself what I care about. I still know myself what's true. I still know what I value. And I think that was kind of like the mantra of the year. We had like actually like 3 different things this year that kind of asked me to think about, like, what's this prevailing thought that keeps coming up? What is something that keeps coming up in your life? And I remember like setting like, well, this was the year of like having to basically constantly come to that conclusion of like, I know this, like I got this, I can do this. I have to stop doubting myself when I have to stop listening to those thoughts. I have to stop allowing those thoughts in the first place. I have to stop letting myself beat myself down, because I know this, like I got this. And so this year was really like a culmination of like, okay, I've learned all the lessons. I've read all the books. I've done all the classes. I've done so many courses. I've done groups. I've done therapy. I've done all these things. But this year, when shit's going, or how do you say, when shit's hitting the fan, do you know these things? Can you apply them to your life? Are they real? Did you actually mean it when you said that you cared about yourself, that you loved yourself, that you wanted this, that you knew this, that you believed this? And this year was the year of like, I believe this. I got this. I know this. And every time I doubted myself, and I went through that cycle so many times this year, but at the end I'd be like, you kidding me? I knew this. Like, I should have just listened to myself, because I knew it. I was ready. I was sure. And this was the year of like, I'm not like, I think it was the first time where I genuinely recognized that I did believe those things. So I guess I gotta give like an example to make it make sense. But like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is like, it's very easy to say that you could tell yourself, I love myself, right? But you can deep down say, I don't. I know I don't. I don't believe that. I'm not lovable. I don't like myself. People don't like me. And so people can then tell you that they like you. People can tell you that you're supposed to like yourself. You can believe that like God says that he loves you, that you love yourself. You can say all those things. It's very different to actually have a moment when you're like, man, I like that. I'm okay with myself. And so what I'm trying to get at is that this year was the year where I kind of genuinely, all the little lessons, I was like, okay, I get it now. Like, yeah, I think that's actually what I think. That's actually what I believe about this topic or this issue or this thing that I've been struggling with for years, that I've been trying to learn about for years. And so in a way, the way I feel is like 2020 gave me all the barriers to cross. It gave me a lot of obstacles to go over, but I went over them. I crossed them. I climbed the wall. I got to the other side, and it showed me that like that stuff had been internalized. And so I guess the word I want to set for this year, and I feel like it's kind of a weird word because it can have like a negative connotation to it as well, but the word I want to set is power. And I guess I feel like I have to explain it. So in a way, it's coming more from a standpoint of like empowerment, but I don't want it just to be like this, like I'm self-empowered kind of, where I think people use the word empowerment as a way to kind of, it can also be used in ways that is not the way I mean it. And so I guess I could just explain kind of what I mean it. This year, I feel like I can genuinely step into the power that I've been given, right? So every year before this, I had just been barely learning, like, what do I have a right to? What do I have a right to feel? What do I have a right to experience? What have I experienced? How do I feel about my life? How do I feel about myself? Who am I? Like, just getting to that base, like, what I think a healthy, established person needs in their life. Like, we all need to get to a point where we can just exist and be okay with existing. Now that you exist, and now that you recognize that as a human being, you have a certain level of power in your life, over your life, and to affect the world around you, how will you use that power? And that's kind of the feeling I'm using. That's the feeling of the word I want to use this year. So I have the power to choose what I want in my life. I have the power to affect the world in the ways that I'm privileged enough to do so. I have the power to believe myself, believe what I believe in, believe God, right? Like, and even God gives us a certain level of power. There's a reason he gave us he gave us willpower. And so that's kind of the standpoint of that word and how I want to use it this year. And so this, I guess, this year so I'm going to talk about those other areas of my life, because I see areas where I could have decided, like, I'm not going to use the power I have in this moment. And because I framed it in that wording of, like, I think every year before this, it's really easy to tell yourself, like, oh, if somebody says something bad to me, I'm going to speak up. Oh, if somebody does this that hurts me, I'm going to do something about it. Or if this situation happens, I'll handle it this way. It's another thing to actually experience those things and then choose to do those things. And every year before this, I think I was just learning what is the thing you're supposed to do. That's my usual question, is like, so what are you supposed to do in this situation? Or what do I have the power to do in this situation? Or how should this situation work? Because I think, like, I entered my adulthood, I entered my years without any lessons. Like, I didn't have people who taught me what's normal, what's right, what's wrong, how do I decide those things, how do I learn about those things. And so it's been years of me just learning those things and kind of recognizing how they actually work in the real world. And so my goal for 2020 was just to keep learning those things, keep getting to that. Like, I wanted a resolution to those things. I wanted to be like, okay, so I've learned all these options, what actually works for me now? What I realized is when the 2020 definitely put barriers in the way, and at every standpoint, it really came down to, this isn't a book anymore. You're not watching a video that's telling you to think about a difficult situation. You're no longer in a situation where you don't have any power to make a decision. To continue moving forward right now is to continue what you're going to continue to do in your life. So if I choose at this moment right now to give in to an old habit, to give in to somebody else's idea, to give in to somebody else's power over me, is no longer just continuing to learn, it's continuing to continue that habit in my life. Like, that will now be something that you're probably going to do again next time and again next time. And it won't be a matter of, like, you're no longer at the standpoint where you can just learn about what to do. This is the moment to do it. Like, you have to do it. You have to choose. How are you going to act in this moment? And I had a lot of opportunities this year to I had to make a decision about how I was going to act, how I was going to continue my life. So this year, now that I have, like, oh, I did this thing that I was terrified to decide to do for years. I finally made this decision, and I'm still alive. I'm still eating every day. I'm still breathing every day. I'm drinking tea now because I don't have coffee anymore, but I'm existing. Life is still continuing. Like, it didn't kill me to do this thing that I thought was so scary. So now that I don't have that excuse, I guess excuse is a bad word, but I don't have that rationale in my mind, like there's no way that can work in real life. This year I want to make sure that I'm continuing to do that and continuing to use that power that I know I have to impact the world around me, to impact my life the way I want it. And I guess I have a lot of little goals, things that I want to work on, like very specific things. I don't feel like sharing those things publicly, just because I think I also have the power to change my mind. I have the power to alter things as they come up. I have the power to affect things differently if I decide that I want to do things differently or have the opportunity to do things differently, and it's nobody else's job to justify it for me, right? Like, I could justify myself. And I guess that's why I only want to share that's how I'm operating. I don't know if that makes sense. So I think sometimes it's really hard to talk to the people in your life and be like, okay, so, especially this is something I've recognized over the years, that like, oh, well, I was learning how to be more confident, or I was learning how to be more assertive, or I was learning how to heal from certain traumas, or learning how to communicate. And when I didn't communicate that that's what I was trying to do, a lot of the times people in my life I hate to use the word agenda, but like everybody has their own kind of like how they want the world to work, and they're affecting the world and the people around them the way that they want. And so they'll see you as a project sometimes. You know, they're like, oh, well, this person's young, or this person's not at the level that I think they should be, so I'm gonna teach them this thing, or I'm gonna make them do this thing or try this thing because I think that's what they need. And this year I felt like I communicated very well with the people who care to have it, who I really care about having in my life, what I was working through, what I was trying to, like, what I was struggling with, and what I was trying to get through. And again, the people who really cared to be in my life, and the people who really you could kind of feel that respect. They respect you and they love you enough to give you that the space, to hold space for you to do those things, for you to work those things out. And the people who don't, you get to make decisions about how you want to continue those relationships because you spoke up about it and you did your part. And so, and I'll give more examples about relationship stuff in a little bit, but or I guess I want to start first with my health, because this was a really bad year for my physical and mental health. Just like a quick overview, so I have really bad eczema. This is actually the healthiest my hands have been in a really long time. And it started in 2019, and I thought I didn't do much about it because I was like, I get like a flare up, and it lasts a couple months, and I'm gonna get through it, right? And then it didn't go away. And it's very frustrating. It's not like the worst thing in the world, but when your hands hurt and you're doing stuff, and it's just like this constant annoyance. Well, then I was like, I'll go to the doctor later. I'll do this later, and if it doesn't end by this date, I'll do something about it at this point. Then I got sick in February. I had a kidney infection, and I was out. They put me on meds. I sucked. And I remember being like, well, this is not a great way to start the year. But when this is over, I'll work on this. I'm going to do this. And then the pandemic hit, right? And then it's like, okay. And in the beginning of the pandemic, we had an exposure, and we had a very front row seat to seeing people who got sick really badly. So we knew from the beginning, like, this isn't a joke. This is potentially something that could be very bad. And I remember that being like obviously affecting my anxiety levels, but also just kind of having to navigate the two, you guys know, the world is really split up right now, and having to navigate like, hey, I know what I know. I've seen what this happens. Also, there's a big pressure not to know those things, not to put any emphasis on those things, not to talk about those things. Nobody wanted to just listen to like, hey, I don't know what I'm supposed to be worried about. What should I be concerned about? What are the rules? What are not the rules? And that brought my anxiety level really high up, to a point where like I really struggled with the mental health end of it, but it was still pretty much like, we're gonna get through this. Everything's fine. Like, this will end soon, and I'll fix it in a little bit. So I kept kind of like being like, okay, if my hands don't get better, I'll set an appointment to the doctor on this day. Okay, well, now I'm going to set an appointment when the pandemic ends. Oh, well, now I got to wait till this happens. Oh, well, I don't know when this will happen, so I'll wait till... So, like, I kept putting off doing something about how I was feeling. And then by the middle of the year, we had a lot of... and I haven't talked about those things publicly, and I'm not gonna, but we had much bigger stressors come in our life, and it was like the energy was sucked completely out of me. I just like, I don't know how to say other than like, I was done. Like, life, like it was like, I went from like, we got this to nothing matters anymore. And I think it was the first time that I ever genuinely opened up and shared just how bad things were. And I had to, not forced, but I had to, in a way. It was no longer an option to keep anything inside my head. Like, it was no longer an option to just deal with it later, or to deal with it when I finish this thing or finish that thing, or to like, oh, well, I'll deal with it myself. Like, this was the year of like, I have to let people in. I have to let people help me. And that was like, that lasted a while. And I'm much better now. Much better now, but in the sense of like, I know my health. I know that depression and anxiety are kind of chronic conditions for me. My hands are still not freaking healed. I had like 1 month where they kind of healed and they came back. And it came back because I got COVID at the end of the year. So I guess when it comes to talking about health, I kind of thought it was funny that the beginning of the year started with like having to go to the urgent care, and then the end of the year ended with having to deal with having to go to urgent care and having to go to deal with COVID and all that stuff. And I think if I hadn't had such a really rough year health-wise, both mental health and physical health, COVID would have been bad. I think it was very, very stressful, and it was very you really have no control over anything, and people are not very supportive sometimes through it, and I had no energy. And I think that because this year I had no energy. I had no energy to deal with anything that wasn't 100% something I needed to or wanted to deal with. And every time I was sick, I was literally out of commission. I guess the way I want to say it is, so this is me kind of transitioning into relationships. So I guess this kind of sucks. I fall into the people pleasing kind of category. And I recognize that, obviously. Like, I recognize that I have remnants of trauma and remnants of having had the kind of life I've had. And a lot of the way that I coped and kept myself safe throughout my childhood and my early adulthood is by not doing what I wanted, but just doing whatever I thought would keep me safe. And a lot of the time was just going along with whatever anybody else was doing, whatever anybody else wanted, whatever anybody else thought was right. So, and like I said, I started my like self-development, all that stuff, more around 2015. But before then, I had an entire lifetime of my entire life was me not listening to myself, but pleasing anybody around me just to keep myself safe, to feel like I won't lose these people. And like, if all my energy, all of my everything was so caught up in just keeping myself safe enough not to lose people around me, not to be hurt by people around me, not to accidentally have conflict with people around me. And so I could say that how do I say this? Okay, there were many points of conflict this year in my relationships that had I had energy, like had I been feeling great because physically I was doing fine and I hadn't been going through all the stress, like I would have mustered up the strength to just, I guess, I wouldn't have confronted any of it. I would have done the thing that pleased that person. I would have said the right things, put on the right face. I would have smiled and pretended everything was fine. I would have felt like shit inside, but I would have just not been me, and I would have people pleased. Basically I would have had the energy to not be authentic, to not be genuine, to not be me, to not be myself, to not to do whatever I had to do to keep that person happy. And this is not one person. I had several instances this year, and once I got on a roll, I kind of went with it. But I think because I was just tired. Like this year I was so tired. Like you ignore phone calls, you ignore text messages, you don't reach out to people who aren't reaching out to you. Because if you're tired, you just don't feel like it. Like, you don't feel like dealing with bullshit. You don't feel like dealing with people who are mean to you. You don't feel like having conversations that aren't fruitful. You don't feel like, you just don't do those things. Because why? Like, they're not helping you in any way. They're not giving you any kind of energy. And I think because I was sick so many times this year, because I was so tired and so stressed out, I put a lot of energy, and any energy I did have, on keeping the relationship I really wanted to keep, and with the people who reciprocated that same energy. Because it's different when there's conflict in a relationship, and there's like, because conflict's gonna happen, like things are gonna happen. And I had a very recent example of this just this week, where like I spoke up about something that bothered me, and guess what? The other person responded to it. We both apologized for our behavior that would be affecting each other, but then we both came to a resolution about how to continue forward. And we reinforced that we care about the relationship. We reinforced that we want to work on certain things. And there was listening, and there was, how would I say it? There was back and forth, and it was just like it was a positive, healthy kind of conflict that I don't think I ever allowed myself to have before. I'm not a conflict person. I'm a person that, like, if somebody looks mad, I'm already like, oh my god, what did I do? Like, they're gonna be, I'm not a conflict person. I hate it. If I do end up having conflict with somebody, it's on my mind for years. I can think of every big major conflict point in my life. And so on that same kind of like level, the relationships where I tried to speak up, and I wasn't given that opportunity, where nobody or that specific person didn't hold space for me, or where I felt that my boundaries were crossed in ways that I wasn't okay with anymore. I think because I was just tired, I was able to just draw the line very clearly and be like, I'm done with this. I'm not handling this anymore, and I'm done. And so this kind of throws into my next category, which is because what normally would happen. So let me explain. So much of my energy constantly is like me dodging these like difficult like relationship dynamics, and me dodging accidentally hurting someone's feelings or saying the wrong thing, and having to like present myself in a certain way, like I'm gonna smile at this person, and I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna do all these things, because I was putting so much energy towards not being myself. The only way that I had like a release of energy, a relief, how do I say that? Basically, I indulged in my bad habits in order for me to feel better, right? And I've talked about this before: binge eating, even like binge watching TV, or completely going into isolation. And this year I noticed like drinking more often, things like that, which are not healthy habits. Things like that are easy to choose when you just feel like crap, and you don't have anybody to talk to, you don't have anybody to help you, nobody to like give you that like hold space for you, and to help you find healthy ways to cope with how you feel. Well, when you don't have any of that, it's easy to just be like, screw it, I'm gonna go eat all this to feel better. And this year, I think because this year was just so hard, and because I didn't have the energy to deal with the stuff that was making me feel that, like holding all that stuff in, I didn't feel the need to do those things as often. And anytime, like, I ate bad, I drank alcohol, I binge watched TV. I mean, those things still happened this year, but none of them were tied to that compulsion. None of it felt like I was giving into a compulsion. I also didn't do it as badly as I would have in the past, where like in the past, it was like it was like a secret, or I didn't want people to know. There was shame attached to it. There was excess attached to it. Versus now, it's like I can grab a bag of chips, eat some chips, and put them down, because I don't feel that like I have to hide this from Tony, or I have to like act a certain way, or I can't tell people, or like, I don't know if that makes sense. So people who deal with things like addiction issues, eating disorders. There's a lot of stuff that even just compulsions, like some people like shop to excess, right? Or gamble to excess, or excessively go out and have inappropriate relationships, or have, people, those are coping mechanisms to deal with how you're feeling in the world, and when you don't have healthy coping mechanisms and you don't have healthy relationships to help you with managing your emotions and regulating how you feel, there's so many options out there. There's so many things out there that can give you that fill. And this year I felt like less and less of a need to act on compulsions, and more of a like how do I say it, like I was doing things preemptively to keep myself stable. And I talked about this in one of my posts, where I talked about how like this year I really felt like I was able to feel good. I was able to experience good things. I was able to really enjoy things because they felt good, not because I thought they should feel good, not because I was manufacturing the good in my life. I wasn't like, we're going to do this today because this is a healthy thing to do and I have to do it in order to feel good. No, it was like, hey, we're doing this thing and I like it. Like, we're having fun right now. Like, I enjoyed doing this. I want to do more of this. And because I was doing activities that were helping me feel better in general, I didn't have to do things to force myself to feel good. And so I guess the way I want to talk about that is like, I embraced the discomfort and I let go of a lot of comfort that came. And I hate to use the word comfort when it comes to like, giving in to negative things in relationships, because obviously it's not comfortable to not be yourself. It's not comfortable to kind of have to put on a persona or put on a mask, but it's more comfortable than the possible fear of what may happen if you don't do it. So I think that this year I really embraced that discomfort of like letting that go, of like, man, saying this is going to be very uncomfortable, or speaking up about this, or not calling this person, or not compulsively doing these things is going to feel like shit. But the result of that was that I was able to embrace comfort in other areas of my life, and little things like just the stupidest things that maybe aren't important in the world but matter to you, like having something you like for food, having something that you like to watch, so buying that thing you want, or like I talked about on my post about how like getting my little coffee maker thing, and like fixing up my room nicely, or like getting just things that like I wouldn't do in the past because I'm like, no, I'm not gonna spend money on this thing that doesn't fit into my budget, or I'm not going to buy myself this thing that's vain, like makeup. I don't buy myself makeup, or I don't buy myself, like, I bought things for my hair this year to help my hair look better. I didn't do anything irresponsibly, but I allowed myself a little more freedom on things that were just for the sake of feeling better. Things like taking breaks, going and having fun, having a cup of coffee, or now getting myself some tea, or like things that in the past I would have felt super guilty about, because I'm like, well, every dollar I spend on myself is a dollar I could have spent on this other more important thing. Or I'd be like, no, that if I wear that one thing or do this one thing, people will think I'm this. Or, that I had all these negative ideas, and there's still a lot of value to some of the beliefs I have, because I don't think over excess of anything is positive, but I allowed myself the small things and without feeling all that guilt. And I think to me that was a big step. It's a big step to be like, I'm allowed to just kick it right now and not do the dishes. Like, I'm allowed to have fun with my friend right now and not like worry about making dinner. I'm allowed to do this. I'm allowed to do that. And it was really nice. I really liked it. And I want to continue to do that this year. I want to continue to just, while I still have very strong, like, how do I say this? Like a really strong resistance to doing things that are just for the sake of pleasure. I think preemptively choosing to do things for the sake of pleasure so that I don't compulsively end up doing things just to feel some goodness is overall healthier. And I have the power to make that decision. So then, on that same kind of like thread, I wanted to talk about my, hobbies on one end and passions on the other end. So this year, mostly because we were in a pandemic, quarantining, there not being as many options or decisions to make outside, as far as like what we can do outside of the house, we did a lot of stuff. Like, we had a lot of experiences. We did a lot of like, I personally, like, there's a lot of stuff I like to do that I just never do because I'm like, I should be working, like, I was able, and that's part of like that whole choosing to give myself that grace of like, I can sit down and do a puzzle right now because I like doing puzzles. Like, yes, I could be editing this thing, or I could be having this conversation, or trying to make a sale, trying to make these things, but I can also just draw because I want to draw, right? Like, I can do things that I want to do just for the sake of doing them without having to be like, well, I have to do it for the sake of like, well, I have to monetize it, or I have to make it like this. It has to be for the house, or it has to be for this person, or I have to be trying to like do something that's worthy of doing. No, this year I did things because I wanted to do them. And guess what? When you do things you want to do, you feel good. And you feel energized. And sometimes you're like, oh, I have a really good idea. Now I'm going to put that to this. And then it even helps you with feeling better when you're doing other things that you have to do that are more work-based or productively or house things, like, on that end, it kind of also gave me a good understanding of what is possible as far as like how much time I can devote to doing certain things realistically versus still having like regular life things that I have to get done, like dishes and laundry and cleaning out the kitty litter and cooking and work. So what's a realistic balance between, having to edit this video, also having to do laundry, and can I also have time to do this thing I said I wanted to do today? What's a realistic balance and a realistic routine for myself? Because in the past, I know a lot of it comes from the fact that a lot of it comes from what I've been taught, and I'll go into this in the work part, but like, not everything that people teach online is for you. Not everything that you've learned in a class, no matter how like certified you are to like, not every single psychology term, not every single coaching term, not every single thing you read in a book about self-help, not every single religious topic fits your life for your season, for your context. And just because somebody says you have to do your day like this in order to be successful, loved, happy, whatever they're trying to say, none of that is always like everything has to be kind of like seen in the context of your actual life. And so for many years I was like having to figure out, like, first and foremost, what are the things I need to do in my life, and then trying to fit them in, and none of it fit very well because it was really hard to make yourself do things that you don't want to do, or to do things that don't really make sense for your life, and to guilt yourself into them, right? Like, I have to wake up at 4 a.m. and work out and do this and read and like all these things. If you make yourself do things just for the sake of that's what's right for you and not what is right for you, well, it's not gonna work out. It's not gonna be good for you, and it's not gonna stick. And this year, I think, kind of letting go of any routine and being like, I'm gonna just start from scratch, like what naturally works in my life. And obviously I have the privilege of making those kind of decisions because I work from home. But it made a big difference, and it allowed me to kind of see how much time, how much energy, what can I actually handle every day. So on that end, I was then able to put a lot more time, energy, and realistic time and energy towards things that I care about and I'm passionate about. And so, you guys, if you see my post, you know that I post about political things, faith-based things, things about immigration, race, things that I really care about. In the past, it's been kind of hard to know, like, you either go hard and then you're completely burnt out, like you can't even handle it anymore, you want to just turn off the TV, you want to turn off everything, you don't want to ever hear about the evil in the world again, or you do nothing, you know, and you kind of force yourself to be apathetic and you feel the guilt of that apathy. So this year, I think, obviously because this year had a lot of those topics come up, and because I guess I internalized a lot more of the lessons from other people who actually do that kind of work in their life, on how to have a balance of what's a healthy life where you are advocating for others, advocating for the things you care about, and having a life, right? Like, there are ways, like, I guess I forget that I fall into those groups. I forget that, like, when I'm talking about people who have disadvantages or people who might be falling into these negative patterns that the world puts on them, I'm falling into those same freaking patterns myself. Like, I'm allowing those ideas to affect me the same way, and I have to step back and realize, if I want to do this work, if I want to care about this stuff, I have to include myself in it, and I have to allow myself to I don't know how to explain it other than, like, you have to incorporate rest, you have to incorporate boundaries, you have to incorporate your life and you being one of the people that make it, right? And so I've learned a lot of that stuff, and I think that because of that, I'll be able to do a little bit better at like that, and making sure that it's not just me and I'm the only one in my life that knows and cares, and not being able to talk to anybody about it. Because being connected to the right people who do this kind of work, groups and organizations, makes a huge difference, because you have that feedback, you have people who can help you finish out what you're trying to do, people who can pick up the slack when you're not able to. Also, the people in your own life should be on the same level as you, or those are the people you have the most power to affect. And this year, I think I have a much clearer stance on how I want to affect the world, and how and have the support for it, but also have like my husband's in on it, right? Like, I don't have to like feel like I'm alone in making decisions, like where you put your support, where you put your financial support, where you put your emotional support, where you put physical support, and making those decisions and having help to make those decisions. And so I think that I have the power to use the privilege that I have to affect the world in the ways that I feel should be affected. And this year I want to use that power to continue to do those things. And that's kind of, I don't want to go into specifics. I guess the next topic is work. So I guess going into the specifics, I have ideas of like, I should do this or I should do that. And for the longest time, I've always like, well, I need to get to this point first. Or when I get this many followers, then I'll have enough people that I can talk about these things I care about. Or like, when I have this many people that I'm coaching, then I could do this at the end of my coaching session. Or I can do, like, I always had like things that I needed to hit in order to be able to then talk about the things that I care about. Well, I guess what I learned this year is if you start talking about those things, a lot of people may not like it. And if you don't set the base value, or how do I say this, like the base habit for what you want your life to be and what you care about and how you want to operate your world, why would it suddenly, when you hit a certain milestone, why would it suddenly become easier then? Or why would the people around you suddenly be okay with that, right? And so I guess what I'm trying to get at is I want to make sure that that's always a part of what I'm doing and it's already incorporated, because then I'm going to attract the people that are also wanting that. And on my website, I have like the values of the people that I want to attract business-wise, right? And one of those values is, or one of those characteristics is good people. And what I mean, I explain that by what I mean by good is people who want good in the world, people who want to affect the world in good ways. And so that really makes a difference, right? Like, should I work with this person? Should I affiliate myself with this product? Should I share this content? Is that appealing to that greater good that I care about and that I want in the world? Will that inspire others to also want to do that greater good in the world? And if it doesn't, then that's not something I need in my life. It's not something that will, it doesn't matter if you make money from something in the short run. Like if you make money from something, but it doesn't help the world, like, okay, you have a few extra bucks, but it didn't get you any closer to your goal. It didn't get you any closer to what you want to do in the world. And a lot of people, I remember seeing a meme that said, I can't wait. It said something along the lines of like, I can't wait till I can make enough money that I can give money to people. Like it was like something like, so I can give to charities, or I can give whatever I want. And I'm like, well, if you're not doing it now when you don't have a lot of money, you're not going to do it later when you have a lot of money, because you're just going to get a more expensive apartment, you're going to get a more expensive car, you're going to get more, you're going to spend more on your daily life. Your cost of living goes up the more you spend. Making more money has absolutely nothing to do with how you spend your money. Let me add a little disclaimer here that I'm specifically talking about people who are already at a very comfortable financial state, who then feel that they need to make goals about getting more money versus doing more good. I'm not talking about people who are in uncomfortable financial states, because if you're poor, it's really hard to think about how you spend your money, let alone having to then be guilted into giving money that you don't have. But I just want to make it clear that that's what I'm referring to, not trying to shame people who are already struggling financially. And if you get into the habit of making decisions, financial, emotional, mental, physical decisions about your life that fit your values right now, when things are hard, when you're sick, when you live in a crappy apartment, when you're barely starting out your relationships, when you're building the foundation of your life, when you don't have all the richness and goodies and all the power in the world, then you have that habit, so that when maybe you're blessed and you get a better job, or you're blessed and you have a nicer house, or you're blessed and you have a bigger community, you have kids, you have a life, like you have all these things that are being given to you, then it doesn't seem like suddenly one day you're like the good person, even though you were okay with not making good decisions to get there, right? So I know that, I guess it's hard for me to kind of talk about those things without giving too many details, but like the reason I have wanted to do any of this was because I hated the way I was making money before this. I hated the things I had to do to kind of like live. I hated how we were spending our money. I hated how we were making decisions, and the pressure that I felt that we like, and this is why I carry a lot of that guilt when like you buy something, because to me it's like, you know, you spend $50 on something, that $50 feeds people. Like that $50 makes a really big difference in other places. And so having to navigate that balance between doing my part so that I still feel like I'm living within the values that I want to live, and I'm creating those habits now so that when I do have kids, it's just a part of what we do, and they see it growing up and they kind of have those values too. And so that I know that if I get to the top at whatever it is that I want to get to, any of those goals I want to hit, I did it knowing that I stuck with my values, and I have my integrity, and nobody can say, well, you did this and you did that. And I know, because throughout the last few years, I've fallen into those traps of like, oh, just do this thing, or I've fallen into like training that like, where I had to talk to people in ways that I didn't like, where I had to try and talk to people that I didn't feel fit a product, where I had to try and sell something that I didn't feel 100% right about. And at the end of the day, that was my decision to do, because I felt that pressure of like, well, you need to be successful in order for people to then listen to you about things that matter in the world, like social issues, about your faith, about your stances in the world. Well, this year I really feel like I was exposed to people who have done it from the beginning, who have stuck to their values, who have stuck to their morals, who have done what's right, regardless of what's popular, regardless of how it is perceived, regardless of how it affected their success worldly, outside of their own value. And I realized that, like, that's I'm seeing that it's possible. It's possible for people to both have happy, successful lives and not be assholes. And I unfollowed a lot of people who I was like very disappointed with this year. And I don't want to talk about only the negatives of 2020. I think we have enough of that. But I definitely, this year was the year of like making very strong decisions about like, okay, this person has been teaching me this for these years, but none of that fit what I wanted to. It was never going to fit what I wanted it to fit. And it may fit other people's lifestyles, but I don't want those lifestyles. So why am I allowing that thought to come in? And that goes with all the areas of my life, from health, relationships, my faith, my work, my mental health, all of that. I think 2020 overall ended up being a positive year. Positive in the sense of that continuation of wanting to like eventually, we're all going through it, right? Everybody's going through difficult times, and we're all going through difficult times in our life. Do those difficult times help build a better life overall? Or I anchor myself to those negative things? And so this year, I want to use the power that I now know I have. Obviously, I'm going to be honest, I think that regardless of how many years you spend growing and learning and healing, and life gets difficult, so there's always going to be something that you have to deal with, and you are always going to have to deal with things. I mean, it's never like suddenly you're fine, everything's good, right? And there's always going to be times where you're like, I don't know what to do, and you make the wrong you make a mistake, or you make the wrong decision, or you realize that you have a whole lot more learning to do, or you were wrong about this. And obviously, that's where I think power gets used in a negative way, where I think people aspire for power, and then they think they're done needing to work on themselves, so then they use power in a negative way. And we see that in our world. I think we've seen that a lot this year. Way too many people who had the power to do better didn't. And so this year I'm hoping to kind of turn that word around and say, like, I have the power to do better. And I also have the power to kind of give myself some grace and allow for me to continue learning and continue growing, continue trying to do better and live better. 2020 was a hard year. I guess we can't, like, I hate to say like 2021 will be good, because we don't know what that even means. I don't think there's such a thing as a good versus bad year. There's just life and there's good and bad times, and all that cheesy stuff you hear all the time. So hopefully this year, we get some breaks and we don't have as many and yeah, I don't know. I'm feeling a little more positive starting this year than I did last year, and I'm feeling a little more positive right now about last year than I think a little bit part of that is the fact that it's a new year and all that, right? But also just because I think in general I was able to have more of these changes that I think will last longer than just this year. So what does this all mean for you? First and foremost, thank you to anybody who watches this video, because I know it's really, really long. Thank you to anybody who liked my post this year, who engaged with what I talked about, people who shared the things that I shared, people who maybe didn't have any conversation with me directly, but I saw you guys sharing the same things I was sharing, meaning you like the same pages that I've been sharing all year. People who just in general did the work to learn how to do better and how to just affect the world in a different way. I've seen a lot of people just change their perspective, and a lot of people start to embrace different avenues of thinking about how we should embrace the world, and how we should deal with COVID, how we should deal with race in America, how we should deal with economic and issues and poverty worldwide and in the US. I've seen people really, really care about those things. I've seen people who are starting to kind of like talk about physical and mental health in different ways. I've seen people who in the past, like, who I know thought differently, who I know believed differently, come to different conclusions about the world around them. And I think that's awesome. And thank you for those of you who kind of came on the journey with me. And thank you to anybody who decides to continue from here moving forward. If you're wanting to kind of, I guess first and foremost, you don't have to make a resolution for the year. You don't have to, you can just be like, you know what, let's just see what happens this year. I think making that decision, kind of being like, we're just going to keep living this year. We're just going to get through the year. That in itself is a good enough intention to get through the full year. I think that we had a shitty, serious year last year. It was a lot to take in, and if you follow like pages that deal with trauma, or like psychology pages, not like the fake psychology pages, but like therapists and people like that, you're going to see a lot of conversation and talk, or maybe like sociology pages, you're going to hear a lot of conversation about how we're experiencing a collective trauma, and this is worldwide. Students, parents, teachers, workers, business owners, anybody with the internet, everybody's having feelings, everybody's processing. A lot of people made decisions that they may not be proud of right now. A lot of people will continue to make decisions that they may look back upon and be like, I wish I had different information. I know that there are people who are changing their mind about certain things. There are people who are just processing, a lot of processing. And if that's all you do this year, if this year all you do is survive, if all you do is get through the year and we just get to 2022 and we're like, we're alive, I think that's it. That's all you can do. That's all you should do. And that in itself is a worthy and amazing resolution to set. Now, if you feel like me, where like 2020 was the year where you learned a lot, and you kind of, this year you're like, I need something more. I need more, I need something to focus on. There's a lot out there, but be really careful who you learn from. Obviously, there are people who are going to take advantage, I think, of, or people who really haven't taken on that lesson of like, hey, maybe 2020 is different, and we shouldn't market to people the same way. We shouldn't sell the same things, and we shouldn't set the same goals of every year, because this year is definitively different. So be careful about how you go about seeking that kind of support. You can send me a message if you want, and we can talk about it. But for example, my church did a whole, like, for New Year's, they did one where they asked these questions. It was like, what do I no longer want in my life in 2021? And what will I, once you take something out of your life, what will you fill it in with? What am I stepping into this year? What does God want me to bring into my life? I thought those questions were amazing, and they really helped with putting into words what I've been trying to figure out. And I'll be posting more things about some of these like lessons that I had this year, so hopefully those help. But questions to ask yourself are like, what is a word I can focus on this year? What are my values? What did I not value last year? What do I wish was different from last year? And don't focus on any of the things you can't control, but what that was under my control did I like and not like last year? And use questions like that to kind of help you think about and process this last year and move into the new year with a different kind of mindset. And if you're struggling, reach out to me. I'm more than happy to have a conversation about it, and then I'll look stuff up for you, because I love looking at that kind of stuff. But yeah, Happy New Year. I hope that wherever you are in your life, whoever you are, whatever's going on, I hope this year's better for us. And so, yeah. Peace out, everyone.